Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jay Mass from the Good Riddance Podcast, and this is just in breaking news on the eve of the Sweet 16 NCAA Basketball Tournament. Good Riddance Podcast has learned that Donald Trump has made picks for the Sweet 16 all the way down to the championship game. For whatever reason, he didn't release the first part of the bracket, but we've got his Sweet 16 picks, his Elite 8 picks, the Final 4, the Final 2, and the champion. Now, let me just warn you right from the start. Donald Trump's picks are somewhat unconventional at times, like the man himself. Kind of like the man himself, too. Some of these picks are quite crazy. But his Final 4 is not all that crazy. His championship game, personally, I think is a little crazy, but I like what he's done with it to some degree. So, let's get started with President Trump's picks. In the 9 versus 5 matchup of Kansas State versus Kentucky, President Donald J. Trump selects the University of Kentucky. Though he won both Kansas and Kentucky in the election, the word on the street is that he went with the University of Kentucky to win that game, which is conventional wisdom, which is outside the norm from him. But what isn't outside the norm from him is the fact that John Calipari, University of Kentucky's coach, is probably as dirty of a coach as Trump is of a human being. So, in that first matchup, Trump takes Kentucky to move on to the Elite 8 over Kansas State, 5 beating 9. In the next matchup, in that same division, Donald Trump selects number 7, Nevada, to beat Loyola Chicago. Now, one, Trump doesn't like anything Chicago, as was evident in the fact that they told him to come on to Chicago and he wouldn't go. So he hates anything Chicago, because Chicago is too liberal for him, too liberal, 100%. So he's going with the number 7 seed to beat the number 11 seed. He likes Nevada over Loyola Chicago. So far he's going with the better seed. Well, here's where it gets tricky down in the West Division. In the first matchup, you have number 9 Florida State versus number 4 Gonzaga. Now, conventional wisdom would be to go with number 4 Gonzaga, but not Donald Trump, because where is Gonzaga located? Just outside of Spokane, Washington, in the state of Washington, and Donald Trump doesn't like them liberals either. So he went with Florida State, located obviously in the state of Florida, which he won, and where he spends a lot of time playing golf and, not doing anything presidential, which I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing anytime that he's not at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But it's funny because he accused President Obama of taking so many vacations, but yet every time you turn around, this guy's playing golf. I wonder if he's even good at it. Probably not. But anyways, in the first matchup in the West, President Donald Trump selects Florida State to get the upset over number 4 Gonzaga. Florida State is moving on to the Elite 8. The next matchup in the West is my Michigan Wolverines, number 3 seed, taking on the Aggies of Texas A&M. Now, here, this is a little bit weird too, because I could see where he would go either way with either one of these teams. One, I could see him going with Michigan because, he likes to tote that he won Michigan, and Michigan's traditionally a blue state, but yet he was able to make it red, just like Governor Schneider did, as he won 2 terms and screwed up the state even more. But let's not get into politics. We're talking about the president's bracket here. I could also see him going with Texas A&M, which would make sense because it's a military school. And, He at least claims that he loves the military so much. But in the 3 versus 7 matchup, because Donald Trump still despises Senator old Teddy Boy from the state of Texas, and there's still some bad blood between those two, President Trump selects my Wolverines to move on to the Elite Eight to play the Florida State Seminoles. So, on the left side of the bracket, Trump has Kentucky, Nevada, Florida State, Michigan. Let's move to the right side of the bracket. At the top, you have number 1 Villanova taking on number 5 West Virginia. Trump goes unconventional on this one because most of us would say Villanova has been good all year long, and West Virginia sometimes is a scary pick in the tournament. But not this president, not the Trumpster. He's going with the coal miners in West Virginia because he's bringing coal jobs back 100%. So he has number 5 West Virginia knocking off number 1 Villanova and moving on to the Elite Eight. In the next matchup in that region, you have Texas Tech number 3 versus number 2 Purdue. So here you have a conundrum for the president once again because he won the state of Indiana and he won the state of Texas. But once again, because of old Senator Ted, the president actually went with what most people probably are thinking, or at least they were thinking until Purdue's big man Haas got hurt. But without Haas, President Trump still selects Purdue to move on. So he has West Virginia, Purdue playing in the Elite Eight on that side. Now, moving down to the bottom of the bracket, you have number 1 Kansas, a state that President Trump won, versus number 5 Clemson from South Carolina, a state that Trump also won. I guess he pulled out his Trump card there too because he did win. But in what we would think would be conventional, Trump did stay conventional on this one, so he didn't go out crazy on that one. He takes the Jayhawks moving on, number 1 seed survives. Here's the most craziest thing that this man of lunacy has done. At the bottom of the bracket, in the final Elite Eight spot, you have the upset-minded number 11 Syracuse Orangemen, who basically almost didn't make the tournament. They were one of the final 4 in that had to play on the Tuesday before the tournament started, going up against Coach K and almighty Duke, the number 2 seed down there. I would say Duke's going to win. I think the rest of the country would say Duke was going to win. I think there's a lot of us that think Duke might even be in the championship game. But Syracuse is located where? In the great state of New York. So this president decided he was a homer after all on this one, and he went with New York, Syracuse, upsetting Duke and moving on to play Kansas in the Elite Eight. All right, so you got Kentucky, Nevada, Florida State, Michigan, West Virginia, Purdue, Kansas, and Syracuse. Who does Trumpster have in his Final Four? In the Kentucky versus Nevada matchup, he's going to stick with fellow scumbag Calipari and the Kentucky Wildcats. The young Cats move on to the Final Four. At the bottom, in Florida State versus Michigan, 2 states that he won, 2 battleground states that he also had to have, but he thinks that if he's going to win re-election again, he's got to win here again. And I hope for the sanity of all of America, he doesn't ever win the state of Michigan in the re-election bid, but he did select Michigan moving on to the Final Four. In West Virginia versus Purdue, 2 states that he won, but he's going to actually stick with them coal miners and them jobs that, haven't happened yet that he promised. And He's got West Virginia upsetting again after upsetting Villanova, upsetting Purdue, moving on to the Final Four. At the bottom, Kansas versus Syracuse. I mean, he went homer last time, so I would assume that he would have went homer again and picked Syracuse to move on to the Final Four after their crazy run. But he stays chalk there, literally, and goes with the Jayhawks, rock chalk Jayhawk. Kansas moves on. And so Trump's Final Four is Kentucky, Michigan, West Virginia, Kansas. In the Kentucky versus Michigan matchup, he finally goes away from Calipari, and he feels like he's got to have the state of Michigan still for re-election bid, so he picks my Wolverines to be in the championship game. Which is funny because I have him in the championship game too, but I have him playing Duke, and obviously he's got West Virginia or Kansas. And so what does Trumpster do? Does he stick with number 1 seed Kansas to play number 3 Michigan, or does he go with number 5 West Virginia? Well, it looks like the Trumpster is going for another upset. He really likes these Mountaineers and these coal miners. Trumpster picks West Virginia to move on to the championship game to play my Michigan Wolverines. Trump got one thing right, because I believe the Wolverines will be there. He got another thing right, too. In President Donald Trump's bracket, much like mine, he has Michigan winning it all. And he hopes to win it all here in the state of Michigan again for re-election. But I'm going to tell you, he's not going to win it all here again for re-election. But I think he's probably right about his 2018 national championship. My Michigan Wolverines. Until next time, go blue and good riddance. Peace.